Hello everyone, this is Jeff of Tal Flare Mouse. We've got an exciting video today with some very rare slugs from Russia called the Anferov Bullet. And these are actually a prototype and probably the only sample in the United States, much less anywhere else in the world. I don't think these were ever sold. These are a fin-stabilized discarding Sabot round, similar to a tank round, just in miniature size for a 12 gauge. They're really cool. Now, these were sent to us by the man himself, Dmitry Anferov, and were sent about 3 years ago. And the poor guy probably thinks that I was going to sit on these things forever and never test them. Now, over the last few years, I've gained a lot of knowledge and experience loading very exotic rounds like this. And you have to understand that there is absolutely no load data for something like this, especially using American powders. I not only have to develop my own load recipe, but get it right the first time. This Anferov prototype is similar to a couple other slugs that are or were commercially available. The first is the French Sabot, I'm probably saying that wrong, fin-stabilized discarding Sabot round. Now it's quite an oddball round, and but very similar to this design. Next, we have an American submission, the Dynaslug Express. Now, this is almost an exact copy of the Sylvester slug, but just poorly done, and the performance was just miserable. And I don't believe that company is in existence anymore. The Sylvester slug above uses a much more complex and intricate Sabot system. It has a plastic tail, but the main body is made of lead. I believe they also make it out of brass too. The Anferov Bullet has a much simpler Sabot system and uses a steel body rather than brass or lead. Now, the polymer used to make the Sabot out of is very rigid and tough, probably the same type of plastic or polymer used to make Glocks out of. Now, dimensionally, the two projectiles look very similar to each other, but our Sylvester weighs in at 0.91 ounces, and our Anferov Bullet comes in just over half an ounce. So even if the load data for the Sylvester was published, it wouldn't apply to this lighter Anferov Bullet. Now, when we add the weight of the Sabots together with the slug, it comes in at just under 3/4 of an ounce. So I'm going to use this weight to factor the load recipe. Now, what powder do I select? Do I use long shot, tight wad? Do I use Alliant Steel or Alliant E3? Those are my four choices, other than Pyrodex or something like that. Now, when we look at the powder burn rate chart, we can see that Alliant E3 and Hodgson Tight Wad are pretty fast powders, and that's what we need for a light slug like that. And E3 and Tight Wad are pretty much interchangeable. You can use the same quantity of each powder and get the same velocity. Now, do we put some kind of a wad behind it? Maybe a cork wad? Gas seal? No, we can't, because we've got a powder charge that's going to develop 8 to 10,000 psi of pressure, and it's going to destroy the fins. This type of round does not use a traditional gas seal. Rather, the Sabot itself is the gas seal. Most of the forces are pushing on the Sabot, and essentially it's pulling the dart down the barrel instead of being pushed down. In order for a 12 gauge shell to function properly, for the powder to even ignite, you need no air gaps in there, no air bubbles or whatever. That will cause either the powder to not ignite at all or a weird delayed ignition. Now, we only need 18 grains for this recipe, but to fill that space, it takes 38 grains, and that would create way too much pressure. It'll create so much pressure, it'll strip the Sabots right off the dart. The dart will come out at a relatively low velocity, and the Sabots fly out at a high velocity. So we have kind of a MacGyver solution here. We've got our 18 grains of powder with a thin nitro card on top of that, and then on top of that we have just some dried used coffee grounds to act as an inert kind of a filler. The nitro card is just there to prevent the two powders from mixing, so we have a real good solid burn. And then the loaded shell looks like that. We have no air gaps We've got the right powder load, and it's ready for action. We've got half of them loaded with E3 and the other half loaded with tightwad. And look at those roll crimps on there, courtesy of the Nick Ross roll crimper on the Reloader Network. Yes, they are back in stock. Great roll crimper. Buy it once and never regret it. And Nick Ross also submitted some really wild slugs for us to test. Let us know which one you'd like to see first. They're beauties. Welcome aboard, Nick. Let's head out and see if my unusual load recipe works or not, or possibly creates some weird barrel obstruction. There's only one way to find out. Now, we got a lot of very good suggestions on how to improve the trigger pull on our safety stand. Now, the biggest problem I was having as I adjusted the elevation of the shotgun in the stand, well, the actuator bolt would not adjust with that. So it would be in a, near the top of the trigger, and it would require a really hard pull. So by slotting it, I can now adjust that with the adjustments of the elevation and get a really crisp trigger pull now. But we'll see how that works out today. First shot, 18 grains of E3 powder. We're going to try it using fully rifled barrel just to get that out of the way. Fin stabilized darts like this don't need spin to stabilize. They're fin stabilized. So let's see how good or how bad these do out of a rifle barrel. Get that out of the way and then we'll test it out of a smooth bore. Let's see how this new trigger works. That is smooth. That was smooth. Now, I was fully prepared for failures, but look at the flight of this thing. We got really good spin. The rifling didn't screw it up, and the accuracy was pretty decent. The coffee solution definitely worked, and I checked the barrel, and there was no residue or anything. The barrel was perfectly clean. And no, I did not smell any coffee smells at all. Okay, this is about where the sticker was, and it might have been like that. But very close to it. That's very promising. Dart looks like still in perfect condition. That's great. No damage to the tail. Penetrated about half the layers of the Kevlar, and then it stopped it. So that's not too bad. It's looking really good. Now if we can just get a velocity reading. All right, now we've got a round loaded with 18 grains of tightwad powder. And I also set the lab radar to rifle mode in case it's going faster than pistol mode, which is about 1600 feet per second. We'll see if we can get a reading this time. It's armed and everything, so if we don't get a reading this time, I'm not sure what to think. Okay, let's give it a try. Light pull on the trigger. There we go. And still no reading. There we go. Okay, very close to our point of aim. I'm happy. They're going off. They're functioning great. No strippage of the sabots. Just can't get a chrono reading for some reason. I don't know what's going on there. In test number 2, using tightwad instead of E3, very similar results. We had a little bit of a wobbly flight there, but all in all, not too bad. The wobbliness could be due to how the sabots release from the dart as it leaves the barrel. If it doesn't release cleanly, it can cause little wobbles like that. For the next test, we'll use a smoothbore shotgun. This is the Benelli. Now it has iron sights, and these may or may not be zeroed for this particular round. what the damage looks like. Just a little shiny little dent. Still no chronograph reading from the Lab Radar LX. Using the smoothbore shotgun, it performed pretty well. We had a little bit of a little waggle there going on, but that's kind of normal with a fin stabilized, self-stabilized projectile like that. Now it did shoot a little bit high. I don't attribute that to anything but the adjustments of the iron sights.
Okay, we are now shooting at the lead plate using the 18 grains of tightwad. Shouldn't be any really any deviation in velocity between the two powders. They're pretty much compatible with each other. They're very similar. Let's see if we can finally get a reading though. Okay, let's pull that really gently. Yeah, it's still shooting a little bit high. I don't think it's the trigger pull causing that. Yeah. Not a terrible shot. Again, we shot a little bit high. I think it's just the sights on that. We haven't used that barrel very much. It has the fixed sights. But plowed through there. Not a dead center shot, which we hope what we really want to get, but not bad at all. The windage was good, elevation just a little bit high.
I like to take a couple shots using the same point of aim just to verify it actually is the sights and not some other attributing factor. But I think at this point we can assume it's just the sights and we can adjust the aim now.
Good solid hit, nothing. Oh, actually pull it out of there. Only a good inch and a quarter from the point of aim. Nothing, no bulge, nothing in the back. It's a really nice deep crater though. One more time there. It's about a knuckle deep.
On our second attempt, the dart landed a little closer to where we wanted it to, but it was really waggling around quite a bit. So I suspect we didn't have clean separation of the two Sabot halves. Ideally, we want both Sabot halves to release from the projectile at the exact same moment. But if that doesn't happen, and one of them hangs up on it, it can throw it off a little bit.
We're going back to the rifle shotgun after that waggle thing. I'm having some doubts. Easy, baby.
Well, it would not be a Fledermaus video if we didn't have a total failure. The projectile ended up hitting the angle iron frame just on the left side of it, and of course out of frame, right? But the good news is we finally got a chronograph reading, 1255 feet per second, but we don't know if that's the velocity of the projectile or maybe the Sabot's. Now, had I tried to push this round any harder than that, I think we would have seen many more failures.
All right, we're at about 40 yards, actually 40 yards, and we'll see how these do. This is the E3 powder. We've got two left. We'll take one shot of each, see how they group at this distance. Still using the rifle barrel. Easy.
Well, it looked like a pretty good shot. The dart hit the dummy and continued on to the safety berm, which is about 250 yards, that a lot of people claim doesn't exist, but it's there. Now, this Russian discarding Sabot fin stabilized round definitely has the potential to be very accurate. And this is just a textbook shot, just beautiful stability and very impressive accuracy. Now, was that one chronograph reading accurate or not, or was it reading maybe the Sabot's? It could be traveling much faster than 1250 feet per second.
Okay, now with the tightwad, put some 60 pounds of lead on the sled. That should convince anyone that it's not going to move around. Okay, let's see.
Well, at our second attempt at 40 yards, well, we had another failure. It's hard to tell what exactly went wrong on this. It probably was another Sabot hang-up, causing the slug to just not, leave cleanly from the barrel and fly straight. And like I said, these do have the potential to be accurate, but they also have the possibility of failures too, and that's an inherent problem with this type of round, getting that Sabot hang up if you don't have a clean release. And I don't think E3 worked any better than tightwad. They seem to give us about the same velocity and results, but overall I'm pretty happy with the results despite the few hiccups we had. This is a very difficult round to find a powder load for. Was my powder load perfect? Probably not, but I kind of got most of them right the first time, so I'm happy with that. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the video. If you don't mind, please give it a thumbs up or a thumbs down if you're that kind of person. I'm just happy you took the time to watch this video and I was able to share it with you.
Remember, if anyone asks you to give up your freedoms for the better good, you tell them that the freedom is the better good. Is that how it goes? Anyway, we'll see you next time.